Every woman is already powerful, though she may not always feel it. Her strength does not disappear because life becomes heavy, nor does her potential fade with time. What weakens her is something far more subtle, almost invisible in the rhythm of daily living. It is the unnoticed habits, the quiet patterns that repeat themselves without reflection, the unconscious responses that drain her energy one small moment at a time. This is the paradox she must learn to see. Her power does not leave her dramatically, it slips away through the everyday choices she overlooks. When a woman pauses long enough to look inward, she sees that her energy, her emotional steadiness, her ability to love with depth or to remain calm when the world becomes loud, is shaped not by grand events but by these quiet, consistent patterns. These habits influence how she speaks when she feels misunderstood, how she reacts when confronted with pressure, how she protects her peace or opens the door to chaos. They determine whether she builds connection or unconsciously pushes it away. The world often teaches her to chase external achievements, but true mastery is not found there. What we speak of today is not success for recognition or applause. It is success for inner alignment, the kind of grounded presence that cannot be taken from her because it is cultivated within her own awareness. Now, let us walk slowly through these daily habits together. They appear simple on the surface, yet when practiced with sincerity, they become gateways to profound transformation. In the early hours of the morning, before responsibilities arrive, a woman stands at a quiet threshold. The world has not demanded anything of her yet. The noise has not begun. At that moment, she is invited to choose the energy she wants to carry into the day. She can begin in scattered movement, or she can begin in centered silence. And it is this first simple choice that shapes everything that comes after. There is an old wisdom that says how you start your morning is how you teach the world to interact with your energy. A scattered beginning invites more chaos. A grounded beginning invites more peace. And peace, more than appearance, more than words, becomes the first language others perceive. It speaks louder than any introduction. That is why the first essential habit is not about adding more actions to the morning, but about removing unnecessary noise. Stillness is not the absence of thought. It is the discipline of not attaching yourself to every thought that arises. It is the quiet decision to begin the day from the inside rather than from the outside. In many Eastern teachings, the world within is seen as the root of all outward expression. When the internal field is cultivated, everything external begins to align more naturally. But when the inner world is cluttered, the external world mirrors this disorder. If the mind is restless, actions become scattered. If the heart feels unsettled, the voice carries tension even when words are gentle. A woman who trains herself to begin the day with silence, reflection, or intentional breathing does not simply calm her mind. She reclaims her sovereignty over her emotional environment. Modern science echoes this ancient insight. Just 10 minutes of quiet presence before speaking, moving, or checking messages stabilizes cortisol, regulates mood, and activates the parts of the brain responsible for clarity and wise decision-making. This subtle shift influences how she responds to life, not from old emotional patterns, but from her higher awareness. And this ability to respond from awareness, rather than from instinct, becomes one of the deepest forms of emotional resilience. There was once a woman who spent her adult years rushing from obligation to obligation. She raised a family, worked tirelessly, and carried responsibilities that stretched her thin. Her body remained tight. Her voice was often tense. Her relationships were filled with small but constant misunderstandings. She felt like she lived her entire life in reaction, always pushed, always pressured. But something shifted when she committed to greeting each morning with stillness. She woke up before sunrise, lit a single candle, and sat with her breath for 15 quiet minutes. No phone, no conversation, no expectations. At first, she felt restless, but after several weeks, she noticed her internal world softening. Her son spoke to her with more warmth. Her coworkers reacted with more calmness. Even the smallest frustrations no longer triggered tears. She had not changed her circumstances. What changed was her presence. Stillness gently reorganized her inner world. She had not sought to change others. She had simply returned to herself. The feminine spirit is deeply intuitive, but intuition does not shout, it whispers, it requires spaciousness. And this is why a quiet morning practice becomes not only spiritual, but profoundly practical. A woman who learns to listen to herself before listening to the world builds a nervous system that can hold itself steady through difficulty. This is her greatest protection in a culture that often rewards urgency over wisdom. In this space, emotional discipline begins, not through force, not through suppression, but through conscious grounding. A woman who begins her day in stillness influences every relationship she touches. She no longer looks to others to provide her peace. She carries peace into the interaction. Her presence becomes something others feel safe around. Children sense her steadiness. Partners feel her consistency. Even in conflict, she becomes less reactive. She sees more clearly. She does not chase. She does not plead. She pauses, and in that pause, strength emerges. She learns the quiet truth that not every comment deserves her energy, not every invitation requires her involvement, and not every problem is hers to solve. This habit of morning stillness is one of the most profound acts of self-respect a woman can offer herself. It is a declaration: before I pour into the world, I will meet myself first. Yet stillness alone is not enough. To understand oneself deeply, a woman must also learn the language of her breath. The breath influences the mind, the emotions, and the body simultaneously. It is both automatic and controllable, a bridge between the unconscious and the conscious. This is why the second daily habit is mastering the breath as a tool to regulate the emotional body. We are born breathing naturally, deeply, rhythmically, but over time, stress and societal conditioning teach women to breathe shallowly. During moments of tension, many unconsciously hold their breath or breathe only into the upper chest. This signals danger to the brain. The body responds with anxiety, defensiveness, irritability, or emotional overwhelm. Many women live in a low-level survival mode without knowing the cause, simply because their breath tells their nervous system to brace itself. When a woman learns to slow her breath, not only during meditation (OT) throughout the day, she communicates to her entire being, I am safe. Safety is the foundation of emotional intelligence. Without it, women fall into over-explaining, apologizing excessively, or taking on emotional burdens that do not belong to them. But when the breath is grounded, the energy becomes steady. This steadiness is magnetic. People sense it before she speaks. There was a school teacher who struggled with anxiety for years. No amount of medication provided lasting relief. When she was introduced to a simple breathing rhythm, inhale gently for 4 counts, exhale slowly for 6, everything shifted. She practiced this before entering her classroom and before difficult conversations. After a month, she noticed increased patience, softer reactions, and deeper clarity. She felt less exhausted by the emotional demands of others. Her relationships softened because she had learned to regulate herself first. Breath creates space between stimulus and response. A woman who breathes before speaking becomes more attentive, more thoughtful, more present. She does not interrupt. She listens. Her words carry more weight because they come from clarity, not from urgency. Presence is power, and presence begins with breath. The breath influences physiology as well. Deep breathing stimulates the vagus nerve, activating the body's calming response. Blood pressure lowers, inflammation reduces, oxytocin rises. With each conscious breath, a woman becomes more emotionally available, more grounded, more attuned. There's a saying in ancient Taoist writings, the wise woman breathes from her heels. In other words, her breath fills her entire body. She becomes rooted like a mountain. Storms may come, but she does not collapse. In a world that often pressures women to move faster and produce more, breath training teaches the opposite wisdom. Move with intention. Breathe with awareness. Speak only when the heart is steady. Breath becomes a discipline of presence. This discipline transforms how a woman navigates conflict as well. Imagine a situation where her partner raises his voice. Her old pattern may have been to match his volume or to retreat in fear, but a woman trained in breath pauses. She grounds herself. She slows the energy of the room by stabilizing her own. She does not need to dominate the moment. She simply enters the present moment fully, and her presence shifts the interaction. There will always be days when emotions overflow, when the breath feels shallow, when stillness feels far away. But mastery is not perfection. Mastery is returning again and again to breath, to stillness, to awareness. Returning is where strength grows. When a woman awakens early, sits in silence, and breathes herself back into her own center, she no longer waits for the world to stabilize her. She becomes her own stability. She becomes her own safety, and the presence she carries becomes quietly healing. In life, it is not the event that shapes us, but our response to it. Most people do not respond, they react. A reaction is fast and emotional. A response is intentional and aware. The difference is subtle but life-changing. For a woman seeking emotional balance, clear communication, and inner strength, learning to observe before reacting is a path to self-mastery. Imagine a woman who enters the room and sees her partner quiet and withdrawn. Her mind immediately spins stories. He must be upset. She must have done something wrong. Before she knows it, irritation rises and she speaks sharply. The moment becomes heavy with tension. Now imagine the same woman after practicing observation. She still feels the discomfort, but she notices it. She names it silently. She breathes. And instead of reacting from insecurity, she responds from clarity. This small shift transforms the relationship dynamic completely. Observation becomes her gateway into wisdom. Eastern teachings describe this as watching the river without jumping into the water. Emotions are like currents. They rise, move, and fall. But we are not the water. We are the awareness behind it. With practice, a woman begins to see her emotional patterns more clearly. She notices triggers. She notices how fatigue affects her. She notices how unresolved wounds influence her reactions. She gains insight into herself. And with insight comes freedom. Psychology confirms that observing emotions rather than being consumed by them engages the rational part of the brain instead of the reactive part. Over time, this enhances patience, clarity, and flexibility. One woman shared that this single habit changed 30 years of marriage. Her husband retreated into silence during conflict, which she always interpreted as rejection. But after learning to pause, breathe, and observe, she began responding with gentleness rather than fear. Her husband opened up for the first time in years because her presence no longer pressured him. Her awareness created emotional safety. We are not taught to pause, we are taught to react. But emotional maturity comes from learning that not every situation requires immediate response. This leads to the next essential habit, emotional detoxification. Emotional detoxification is the quiet, daily cleansing of the inner world. Just as the body requires hygiene, the heart requires its own form of clearing. Without it, unprocessed emotions accumulate. These unresolved layers begin to cloud perception, influence reactions, and distort the way a woman communicates and connects. Many carry emotional residue from days, weeks, even years without noticing its weight. They continue moving, functioning, giving, but something within grows heavy, this debt. Oxification is not dramatic. It is not loud. It is not a sudden purge. It is a subtle discipline, an intentional practice of meeting your inner experiences with honesty and compassion. Just as dirt left untouched becomes grime, emotions left unacknowledged become tension in the body and confusion in relationships. Emotional detox is the habit that keeps the inner space clean, soft, breathable. One of the simplest yet most effective tools for emotional clearing is reflective journaling. Not as a performance, not as a diary of events, but as a conversation with your own heart. At the end of each day, a woman can sit quietly and allow her emotional world to be seen. She may write, "I felt dismissed during that conversation," or "My efforts went unnoticed today," or "I felt joy when my daughter hugged me." The purpose is not to solve anything. The purpose is to reveal. Emotions have a natural cycle. When they are acknowledged, they move. When they are ignored, they stagnate. A woman once shared her experience after years of carrying silent burdens. She held expectations without expressing them. She endured disappointments without speaking them. She swallowed her needs because she did not want to burden others. Over time, her joy dimmed. She snapped more easily at her family. She felt constantly tired, even on restful days. When she began writing one unsent letter each day, to her partner, to her past self, to her father, something shifted. By giving her inner world a place to speak, she lightened what she had held for too long. Her body softened. Her patience returned. Her laughter reappeared. Emotional detox had cleared space for her true self to breathe again. Nature is another form of emotional cleansing. A slow walk beneath trees, listening to birds, watching clouds drift, or sitting near water, all of these naturally regulate the nervous system. Nature has no judgment. It absorbs emotional noise without effort. When a woman steps into nature with the intention to release, her internal state shifts. The mind clears, the heart softens, the breath slows, the body recognizes safety. In psychological research, time in nature reduces cortisol and supports emotional recalibration. Spiritually, nature teaches impermanence. A leaf falls without resistance. The river flows without fear. This gentle wisdom reminds a woman that emotions are meant to pass, not remain trapped. Sometimes emotional detox takes place through shared vulnerability. Not with many people, but with one person who can hold emotional truth without rushing to fix it. Someone who listens with presence. Someone who allows messiness without judgment. This kind of connection is rare but deeply healing. When Oman has such a space, she must cherish it, because sharing with a safe presence can release burdens the body has held for years. Another powerful method of emotional release is movement. The body stores feelings that the mind is not ready to process. The hips hold old grief, the shoulders hold responsibility, the jaw holds unspoken words. Gentle movement, yoga, stretching, dance, shaking the limbs, helps release what the mind has trapped. When the body moves with awareness, emotional blocks loosen. What felt heavy becomes fluid again. But emotional detox cannot happen without acknowledgement. A woman must learn to notice her own internal state. I feel bitterness today. There is tightness in my chest. This sadness has been ignored. Once felt, emotion loses its power to control. It becomes simply a signal. And when a woman takes responsibility for her emotions, her relationships transform. She no longer projects old wounds onto those she loves. She does not confuse present safety with past hurt. She communicates clearly. She asks for what she needs without expectation that others must guess. She apologizes when necessary. Her presence becomes easier to love, easier to trust, easier to connect with. A woman who carries no emotional residue has a softness that does not come from weakness, but from clarity. Her eyes are bright, her voice is anchored, her presence is light. She does not pretend kindness, she embodies it because she is no longer battling her own unresolved emotions. From a spiritual perspective, this is purification, not moral purity, but energetic purity. A heart that releases does not cling. A woman who lives in this rhythm becomes open, present, conscious. Her energy invites others to rise. These simple habits of pausing before reacting, breathing consciously, and releasing emotions daily do not appear glamorous, but they are profoundly transformative. They determine the quality of her health, her relationships, her joy, and her capacity to love without losing herself. A woman who knows how to witness her emotions instead of drowning in them becomes a sanctuary for herself and for those she encounters. And this brings us to the next habit, the power of stillness. Stillness, in a world overflowing with noise, is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Silence is often misunderstood as emptiness, but silence in its true form is full. It holds insight, it holds truth, it holds presence. It is in the quiet moments that a woman meets herself without distraction, without roles, without expectations. Beneath everything she does, there is someone she is, and stillness is the bridge to that authentic self. Eastern wisdom teaches that stillness is not an escape from life, but a deeper entry into it. A woman who practices stillness begins to experience life with heightened clarity. She hears her own breath. She feels the subtle movements of her internal world. She becomes aware of sensations, tensions, and longings that constant motion hides. Neuroscience shows that when the brain rests, it activates networks responsible for emotional processing and insight. Stillness allows the mind to reorganize itself, to integrate experiences, to release confusion. A woman who begins each day with quiet, without reaching for her phone, without immediately stepping into responsibility, gives herself the gift of presence. She may light a candle. She may place a hand on her heart. She may simply sit. Some mornings contain peace. Others contain restlessness. But she does not fight either. She witnesses both with the same gentle attention. Over time, she discovers that she no longer enters the day in a state of urgency. She enters with clarity. She becomes rooted rather than rushed. This inner rooting affects relationships profoundly. A still woe. Man is not easily provoked. She does not over-explain. She does not analyze every shift in someone else's tone. She does not grasp for reassurance. Her field feels spacious. Her loved ones feel safer around her. Children feel calmer. Partners feel more open. People breathe easier in her presence. True stillness is a quiet authority. There is a simple Zen instruction. A student once asked a master, "How do I become wise?" The master replied, "Sit down and be quiet." When the student waited for further explanation, the master said, "Then wisdom will come." The teaching is simple, but not easy. To be still in a world driven by speed is an act of courage. It is a reclaiming of attention. Stillness regulates the nervous system. It reduces tension. It lowers cortisol. It restores emotional balance. But stillness is not only physical, it is emotional. Emotional stillness is the ability to feel without becoming overwhelmed. It is the ability to hold sadness without collapsing, to feel joy without fearing its end, to sit with discomfort without rushing to escape it. Emotional stillness deepens a woman's capacity for connection. Stillness reveals patterns long hidden. A woman might notice that loneliness leads her to distract herself, or that discomfort makes her overtalk, or that feelings of inadequacy cause her to give more than she has. In stillness, truth rises gently, and truth is the beginning of healing. Through stillness, a woman's intuition grows louder. Her internal guidance becomes clearer. She learns to trust herself, not because she always knows the right answer, but because she knows how to return to her center. There was a woman who often gave more than she had. She served others endlessly. She believed she was acting from love, but in silence, she discovered the truth. She was acting from fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of not being enough. Through stillness, she saw this with clarity, and gradually she learned to give from fullness rather than from emptiness. Her relationships transformed because her energy transformed. Stillness teaches a woman that she does not need to fix everything. She does not need to fill every silence. She does not need to carry every burden. She learns the art of being rather than performing. Her relationships soften. She listens more deeply. She speaks less but with more intention. She becomes someone whose presence itself teaches. Stillness also guides her away from distractio and toward authenticity. She begins to recognize when she is acting from conditioning rather than truth. She sees when she is shrinking herself to be accepted or expanding herself to be noticed. She becomes more discerning. Simplification becomes intuitive. Space becomes healing. This stillness naturally leads into the next habit, strengthening the body with deliberate movement. The body is a vessel for energy. When it is weak, energy becomes stagnant. When it is strong, energy flows. Physical strength is not a matter of aesthetics. It is a matter of discipline, vitality, and emotional steadiness. When a woman trains her body, she trains her mind. When she strengthens her muscles, she strengthens her resolve. When she stresses her body in healthy ways, she becomes more resilient emotionally. In the Shaolin tradition, physical training is a form of meditation. It builds discipline, it builds awareness, it builds confidence. For a woman, strength training does not remove femininity, it enhances it. It deepens her sense of capability. It grounds her, it connects her to her breath. Every squat, every stretch, every slow movement becomes a conversation between her mind and her body. Physical discipline affects emotional discipline. A woman who commits to moving her body regularly develops consistency. She learns to show up for herself, even on days she feels unmotivated. She builds trust with herself. Her posture changes, not only physically, but energetically. She occupies space differently. She carries herself with quiet assurance. Exercise releases stored tension. It clears stagnant energy. It awakens vitality. And it strengthens the mind's ability to stay steady under pressure. A physically strong woman becomes less reactive because her body knows how to hold intensity without collapsing. But strength is not only physical, it is also mental. And to cultivate mental strength, a woman must develop clarity and focus. This is the next essential habit. Clarity is the lens through which a woman sees her life. Without clarity, she moves in emotional fog. She feels drained without knowing why. She says yes when she means no. She loses direction. When clarity is missing, relationships feel confusing, decisions feel heavy, and self-confidence weakens. Clarity comes from solitude, from time spent alone without distraction, from moments where external noise fades and internal truth emerges. Solitude is not loneliness, it is nourishment. It is the space where a woman meets the version of herself beneath all expectations. It is where she asks, what do I truly feel? What do I truly want? What aligns with my values? These questions cannot be answered in chaos. They require quiet. In solitude, a woman remembers herself, and that remembrance becomes the foundation for boundaries, another essential habit.